The Meaning of Marxism by Paul D'Amato. Section. Be all that you can be. A uniquely fluid class system that allows for significant upward mobility is, quote, the promise that lies at the heart of the American dream, according to a New York Times study on class in the United States. The ability of the poor and the working class to climb the social ladder has always been exaggerated. But in the early phases of industrial development, it had a certain amount of validity. The abundance of cheap land in the West for a time offered workers the opportunity to retire from wage labor and become farmers. Each new wave of immigrants would start at the bottom, but might dream of improving their lot by moving up and out of the working class. This provided a safety valve, preventing the formation of what Engels called a permanent proletariat. Once westward expansion had completed its course by the end of the 1890s, however, that safety valve was closed. But the dream never disappeared. Being your own boss, starting up a small business where there are foremen or managers bossing you around, continues to be seen as a way out of the working class. The dream is a backhanded acknowledgement of the alienating, tedious, and unrewarding quality of wage labor. But the dream also has an ideological purpose: to promote the idea that individuals can make something out of themselves, not through collective struggle, but by dint of individual spunk and hard work. Conversely, it reinforces the idea that those who are stuck in the working class or in poverty deserve it, because they haven't tried hard enough to get out. How realistic is it for most workers to become their own boss? There are lots of small businesses in the United States, but they are responsible for only a small part of total employment and total wealth. In the United States, there are 3,551 larger firms that employ 2,500 or more workers, accounting for 37% of the total workforce and 43% of the total payroll. On the other hand, 3.75 million businesses that employ 9 or fewer workers account for only 11% of employment and a paltry 8.7% of total payroll. The problem with the dream of owning your own business is that it is a precarious existence that often ends in bankruptcy. Only half of newly created small businesses are still in business after 4 years. Indeed, every year, about as many small businesses close as are created. In 2004, for example, 580,900 new small businesses opened, but 576,200 closed. 34,317 of these ended in bankruptcy. For millions of people, the dream of ownership means pouring your life savings into a business venture that requires endless work and the constant threat of failure to show for it. The small minority that are lucky enough to grow into real businesses end up surviving by exploiting other workers, profiting from the difference between labor's output and labor's pay. That is, by becoming their own boss, they also become someone else's boss. According to the New York Times study, income mobility in the United States has been on the decline for the last 3 decades. In the past, notes one Michigan economist cited in the study, people would say, "Don't worry about inequality. The offspring of the poor have chances as good as the chances of the offspring of the rich. Well, that's not true. It's not respectable in scholarly circles anymore to make that argument. End quote. According to Sharon Smith, quote, "This is the first generation of young workers in U.S. history that faces a substantially lower standard of living than their parents." End quote. While there are certainly some people who move out of the working class, and some middle-class people who become capitalists, the movement also works in the other direction, toward downward mobility. Whether we use the more superficial measure of income, or whether we use the more accurate measure of class mobility, the overall picture doesn't change much from year to year. Income distribution today is as unequal as it was on the eve of the Great Depression. The ultimate argument against the dream of upward mobility for the majority is the fact that the economy is a social pyramid. Lots of room at the bottom, very little room at the top. Workers in the United States, just like workers everywhere else, can only advance through joint struggle with their class, not by trying to climb out of that class. End of section.